I'm Thibault, working at the French Embassy in the political sections. Thanks a lot for a great turnout for this event dedicated to the third United Nations Ocean Conference. And because we are on a tight schedule, I will ask to the floor Mrs. Agnès van der Meulen, which is the Deputy Head of Mission of the French Embassy, to deliver a few introductory remarks.
Bonjour, good morning, everyone. Senator Whitehouse, that's a destiny. Dear Senator, thank you so much for coming over. Mesdames les ambassadrices, Madame Ambassadors, friends of the ocean, so welcome everyone. It is my pleasure on behalf of our ambassador who is on Colorado to welcome you, and I'm delighted to see so many distinguished guests here at the Embassy of France, la Maison Française, even this building, this morning. Almost 2 months from now to the day, Nice and Monaco will be hosting the largest international conference in history, focused entirely on the oceans, seas, and marine resources. The conference will be organized by France and Costa Rica. Of course, there have been many other ministerial conferences on the issue, thanks God, but this is the first to feature heads of states and governments. What makes the 2025 UN Ocean Conference stands out goes beyond the fact that dozens of sovereign rulers, presidents, and prime minister will be in attendance. The participants joining us for these 2 weeks of important events on the Riviera range from policymakers to scientists, non-profit leaders, philanthropists, development bank representatives, maritime industry executives, and female ocean advocates like Catherine Chabaud, who I have the pleasure to welcome over there, whom I'd also like to thank for coming over all the way to the ocean, all the way from France to be here with us today. The overarching theme of this year's conference is accelerating action and mobilizing all actors to conserve and sustainability use the ocean. That is the goal of this conference. In Nice, many different countries will come together to adopt the Nice Ocean Action Plan, which is comprised of a political declaration and a list of voluntary commitments from many stakeholders and coalitions. I'd like to quote just 3 of these commitments to give you an idea. Accelerating the entry into force of the agreement on marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, known as the BBNG agreement, which I had the pleasure to work a little bit on many years before. Establishing the Ocean Rise and Resilience Coalition of coastal cities and regions facing sea level rise. I was ambassador to Malta, and I know how important it is for many islands, small, particularly, in fact, not far from where we stand in the Antilles and in South America, also the Pacific. And founding the Space for Ocean Alliance, that is the 3rd example, which aims to leverage satellite observation capabilities to protect the ocean. And here I have to say, we still hope to keep this wonderful cooperation we had with US agencies. The panelists you will be hearing from today represent a wide range of fields, from Congress to international organizations, NGOs, philanthropic foundations, and the worlds of sailing and scientific exploration. All of them are passionate about the ocean and can help us better understand ocean-related challenges, as well as the reasons they believe that the UNOC 3 in Nice next June will be a turning point for humanity. The US is a major ocean nation, and its contribution to our understanding of the ocean, the fight against illegal fishing and plastic pollution, and the development of the blue economy have been crucial for all of us. We look forward to having US representatives from the federal government, state and coastal city governments, the business community, NGOs, and research institutions join us in these. Now, in the light of the fact that Costa Rica is co-hosting the UNOC 3 with France, I'd like to hand it over to the ambassador of Costa Rica to the US, Dr. Catalina Crespo Sancho. Thank you so much for your listening, and thank you, Ambassador, for joining me on the stage and organizing.
Good morning, everyone. What a pleasure to see this great group of people. And I heard that it's sold out. So that means that there is a commitment towards the environment, towards oceans. So it is a great pleasure to open together with the Embassy of France this Blue Talk as we approach the 3rd United Nations Ocean Conference. I would like to extend my gratitude to Madame von der Moule, to the deputy, who is the Deputy Chief of Mission of the French Embassy, to Senator Whitehouse, and all the ambassadors, panelists, and attendees joining us today. However, in order to understand the importance and the value of the oceans, I would like you to join me in taking a deep, very deep breath today. Like, 50% of that air you just took in comes from the ocean, of that oxygen, 50%. So it is, as you can see, oceans are quite important for survival, beyond the other things that we're going to talk and hear about and things that you already know. So for Costa Rica as a co-host, these spaces are essential for accelerating action towards ocean conservation and sustainability. The significance of the ocean goes beyond being a natural resource, beyond helping us, breathe, which we just experienced. It serves as a point of connection between nations and regions and a vital driver of our planet's balance. We can confidently say that the ocean is the great storyteller of our history, connecting continents, nurturing generations, and reminding us that we share one blue heart. Costa Rica has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to ocean protection. Historically, we've been just committed to environment. In 2023, the country hosted the high-level event Immersed in Change, where the Peace for the Ocean Declaration was launched, and an initiative already supported by 27 countries and 10 NGOs. Additionally, we have expanded, so this is a big thing. We've expanded our marine protected areas from 3% to 30%. You hear that? 3% to 30% of our maritime territories, strengthening our leadership in marine conservation throughout the creation of it's called the Bicentennial Marine Management Area. Bicentennial because this was the time that we also were 200 years of independence. So that's also that it was those two together. Finally, we have made our contribution, and I think some of you, many of you were there, by inaugurating an art exhibit, which was called Waves of Harmony, a global art exhibition of the interconnectedness of oceans and communities, transcending geographical boundaries, which is still at our embassy. It was 17 countries from all over the world who donated, I wish we could keep some at the embassy, but who share their pieces of art there. So it is still going on until May 3rd. So it is open to the public. So please feel free to come by the embassy and look at this art exhibition. Our unwavering commitment drives us to be creative in tackling the present challenges we face, uniting countries and regions towards this crucial call to protect our most vital resource. Let us continue working together No matter what region you are in the world, we all need a clean, good environment to help us all. And the ocean is something that connects us all. So thank you very much. Thank you to the Embassy of France. Thank you to the team of the Embassy of Costa Rica and that make this possible, and for all of you to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here and want to express my appreciation to the French government and the embassy for long-time leadership on climate and oceans issues. I hope to see you in Nice if the Senate schedule allows. If the Senate schedule allows, I will also be going to the Our Oceans conference coming up in Korea, where it appears I will be the only official from the United States government attending, which gives you an idea of how very disappointing our government is right now on these and many other issues. I do think we have a lot of opportunities, though, and if I had to do a little opportunities list, the first would have to do with protecting international fisheries. There is a bipartisan bill with Senator Sullivan and me that's still percolating, hoping to get into the National Defense Authorization Act, and I think there's a revival of interest in the High Seas Treaty and even in the Law of the Sea Treaty. Unfortunately, the interest in the Law of the Sea Treaty is probably driven by deep sea mining more than any concern for the welfare of the oceans in this administration. We're also trying to improve overseas fisheries enforcement in the open seas, working with private groups like the JAC, the Joint Analytics Cell, which is a very well-managed assemblage of private sector organizations that are doing their best to map and track the pirate fishing fleet of China and of just general bad pirate fishing operators. So I think there's considerable room. We've been banging away at the Coast Guard and the Navy to exchange information more effectively with each other about these illegal fishing fleets, and also sharing that information better with these private sector organizations. So I think there's still room for progress there. And as you understand that these pirate fleets are not just illegal fishing fleets, they also traffic in other illicit cargo, and many of them are essentially slave ships. And so for a great number of reasons, this is a worthy target for all of us. Solving the plastics problem is going to be another big issue. I was embarrassed by the Biden administration's position taken in the UN plastics negotiations, and 4 senators went to Ottawa to publicly object to the weakness of the United States' position. If anything, it has gone from bad to worse under this current administration. So I really think that the participants in the plastics coalition of the willing need to begin to move as a coalition of the willing. I think waiting around for Iran, Russia, China, and the United States, what company we're in, to act is just a failed gambit. And you have to take the coalition for the willing and see what you can do together, and then drag the rest of us along. But if you wait for those countries to get over the power of having a veto and destroying progress on ocean plastics, I don't think it's going to turn out well. So I hope that in Korea and in Nice, discussions emerge on how to deal with ocean plastics, leaving the people who don't want to deal with it to the side. Obviously, the most important issue facing our oceans is climate change, both from acidification, where we see the little pteropods out off our northwest coast experiencing enormous shell damage just from the change in the acidification of the water. If you know anything about like trophic layers, I'm married to a marine scientist, so I had to learn some of this stuff. If you take out the pteropods, there's a whole cascade of calamities that follow. That's just one example of what comes from the ocean acidification issues. And then there are the zettajoules. A joule, of course, is the unit of measure of heat energy. A zettajoule has 21 zeros behind it. So it's a massively big number, even for people in Congress who play with big numbers all the time. The measure of how big a number it is to compare it to the complete total energy production of the human species on planet Earth. Everything, every oven, every car, every furnace, every power plant, everything adds up to about a half of a zettajoule of energy. And for the price of the fossil fuel component of that half zettajoule, we are putting 14 zettajoules of energy into the oceans every single year, which is why coral reefs are dying, which is why sea levels are rising, which is why fisheries are migrating away or dying off, which is why we're losing ice pack. So we really need to make sure that we solve the climate problem. Unfortunately, this administration is more or less run on this issue by fossil fuel gangsters. There's no nicer way to describe what they are doing. And so we're in a very dangerous place. The Potsdam Institute has said that of the 1,200 different climate scenarios that were presented to the IPCC, there are 11 that remain. 11 out of 1,200 that remain that put us on a pathway to climate safety. Every single one of them shares two characteristics. One, we overshoot first. So we need to be really diligent about figuring out how you extract excess carbon from the atmosphere. It's not enough to stop it any longer. We now have to go back and figure out getting it out. And two, they all need a price on carbon pollution. For as long as it's free to pollute, we're going to continue to fail. So we really need to work hard on that. And there, I think, our committee said, give me the right fulcrum, and with a lever I can move the world. The fulcrum out there on climate safety is now the EU CBAM. It is the price on carbon that is real, that exists, that the UK is joining. I'm hoping in all the tariff madness that we're going on right now, it falls out is Canada and Mexico joining the CBAM as well. Then we'll be surrounded. That would be a good thing, actually. So I really encourage all of you, and I want to again thank France for its leadership with the EU in defending the CBAM. I think if we fail on the CBAM, if the bullies in government in Washington are able to force the European Union to back off of its carbon tariff regime, then we fail on climate. It's as simple as that. And the Earth pitches off into a whole new trajectory of damage and despair. So my message on oceans and everything else that has to do with climate is primarily at all costs, under all circumstances, and no matter what the pressure, do not yield or buckle on the CBAM. Stick to it. And I will tell you that there's even a bipartisan work going on in the Senate on carbon border tariffs. Senator Cassidy of Louisiana is going to be introducing his bill, he says, this week. So there's actually a whiff of bipartisan hope there. So we have enormous, enormous work to do. We have big opportunities. One simple target for climate is shipping fees, pollution fees on shipping. I think the shipping industry is actually pretty amenable to that. Some of the major ones want it because it prevents people from cheating and undercutting them on price, and they're happy to clean up their ships and their fuel posture. So we have quite good targets ahead of us to protect our open seas, to protect our fisheries, to get the plastics slowed down flowing into our oceans, and to deal with the pollution of our climate and our oceans from the fossil fuel industry. But oh my God, what a task we have in front of us. So we really need to buckle down and be deadly serious about this and make progress where we can, when we can. And if others are not willing to follow, then they just have to get the hell out of the way. We can no longer allow ourselves to be slowed down by the recalcitrants. Thank you very much again to France for your leadership, for hosting us in Nice. And it's wonderful to be with all of you who understand oceans and care about the very dire situation we are presently in. Thank you.
And welcome. It's fun to see a big crowd on what day of the week is it? Tuesday? On a Tuesday? And I know that you weren't only looking for something to do other than go to the office, so I think you're here for the right reasons. We're going to talk about ocean governance with this this panel. It was sobering to hear Senator Whitehouse talking about despair and grief. We're going to try and stay on the more optimistic side if we can. My name is John Bowermaster. I'm a writer and a filmmaker. I have a long experience with National Geographic. I'm one of their ocean heroes. I am more comfortable behind the camera than in front of the camera, but we've made lots and lots of films about ocean-related issues. And as I'm going to ask each of these persons to comment, I'd like to throw out something that gives me optimism in regard to ocean governance, and that is, I've traveled to Antarctica many times, a couple dozen times, and the treaty that governs Antarctica, the international treaty that governs Antarctica successfully since the 1960s and now through the 2040s, is a great example of coordination that proves that an international treaty can work, which I like to see. So on that, maybe we'll start with Catherine and just introduce yourself and then tell us something that you're optimistic about when it comes to ocean governance, and we'll go from there.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to the French Embassy for the invitation. To be honest, I wasn't really, at the beginning I said, is it a good idea to cross the Atlantic, to fly, to come here to Washington to speak about ocean? But it is important, I think, to still push our issues, etc. So many thanks for the Blue Talk and many thanks for the question. In short, and I will give 5 examples of optimism.
Who are you?
Who am I? My name is Catherine Chabaud. I'm a former sailor, a former journalist, as you. And I'm supposed to be the first woman who completes the Vendée Globe. You know, the round the world race without stop, without help. It was in 1996, and I sailed this race twice. And and since 22.
We've never met, but I've written about the Vendée Globe before, and I know many of the sailors who've participated in more quiet moments doing adventures around the world. Myself and my teammates, we debate often who are the greatest athletes, and I contend that around the world, solo sailors are the greatest athletes on the planet, more than Lance Armstrong, who, when he finished a day, would inject himself with drugs and get helicoptered to a chateau for massages and things. Whereas Catherine, for how many days the Vendée Globe?
Yeah, the first one, 140 days.
140 days alone, managing everything, sailing the ship, fixing the ship, communication, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway.
Yeah, and you wrote a book about the Vendée Globe also. So 5 very short examples to be optimistic. In 1991, when I crossed the Atlantic the first time, it was a solo race. I met plastic in the middle of the Atlantic, and at that time, nobody was speaking about the problem of the plastic in 1991. Today, we have negotiations for a treaty. So it takes a long time, but okay. BBNJ, in 2013, I organized an international conference in Paris. We launched an appeal to have negotiations on the ICAs, and today we have a treaty on the ICAs to create MPAs, etc. In 2014, with other stakeholders, we created this ocean and climate platform. And at that time, as the ambassador said, we were trying to explain that when we breathe, half of the breath came from the ocean. And today, and what it was for, it was to put the ocean in the climate negotiation. And today, the ocean is in the climate negotiation. Sails on cargo ship to reduce the emission of the cargo, we need to put, it's an easy solution, but it's a reality today. And the last one, this night I received a message from a scientist, a very good friend, and we are trying to push his idea, that is to develop infrastructure, maritime infrastructure with positive impact. He is trying to push fishermen and energeticians for energy together, and he sent me a message. We succeed. We are going to launch a field and on appelle offshore farm, and with fishermen, and it's an eco-design of these infrastructures, and it's very interesting because you cross solutions, and I think that's why everything is, those solutions are very interesting. The only thing is we are not going enough fast, so we need a better governance to accelerate.
Victor?
Great. Can I just say I agree with everything Madame Chabaud said and leave it there? But really good.
Won't make very good panel if we just agree.
Great. Good morning to all of you. My name is Victor Mosoti. I'm Chief Counsel for Environment and International Law at the World Bank. Really appreciate the invitation to be here. Very much appreciate the French Embassy and the Costa Rican Embassy for hosting this event. What am I optimistic about? I think the Senator talked a lot about the forthcoming Oceans Conference in Nice. There's a reason to be optimistic about that conference. Why? Because, you know, it is going to be a platform for further discussions on oceans governance. There's a lot of momentum towards that conference, and I'm optimistic that something good on oceans governance is going to come out of that conference. So that's my reason to be optimistic, along the lines of what Madame Chabaud said about the need for these international processes that bring us together to find solutions to the most difficult problems. Thanks.
Rita?
Thank you very much. Thank you, and hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the Embassy of France and Costa Rica for your leadership. It's really a pleasure to be with you, with the distinguished panelists, but also with all of you and all your interest in the ocean. I think I would start with that being one of the first reasons of being optimistic, of having more people being interested in the ocean. I'll return and introduce myself first. My name is Rita Zaghloul. I'm the director of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. I'll be able to talk a bit more about it, but it's a coalition of 120 countries led by Costa Rica and France, championing the protection of at least 30% of our land and ocean by 2030. I think beyond the reasons that have been mentioned before, which I fully agree, and not to say that I think we have to disagree with all of what's been said, but I do think that there's also the component of being optimistic more coming from the wider and not only the environmentalist community. I see interest in the ocean coming much more from beyond our community. That's one of the reasons that I also feel more optimistic. Now we talk about the protection of at least 30% of our planet's land and ocean by 2030, and we see it as something that is a given. But 5 years ago, this was something that was really not a reality. And we were hearing many of the scientists saying that this was the minimum needed, but we actually didn't have an agreement. And 3 years ago, we managed to have that agreement within the Convention on Biological Diversity. In 2004, the conversation about the high seas and areas beyond national jurisdiction started happening back in 2004. It wasn't until 2018 that the discussion started, and 2023 we had the BBNJ. So I think there are a lot of reasons of being optimistic, but I would just caution and say, near to optimistic, we need to also push for action. I think optimistic is good, and we have to recognize what have been done, because I think being optimistic gives us strength and this power to be able to advance and resilience, but at the same time it should be accompanied by action, and very much looking forward to talking about action as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, un grand merci à la France for having organized this event and your leadership on oceans, and also to Costa Rica, muchas gracias. Together, co-hosts in Nice, we look forward to working with you. I say we look forward to working with you because I am François Bellet and I work with the Division for Ocean Affairs and Law of the Sea of the Office of Legal Affairs at the United Nations, and we're intimately involved in this process. We are the Secretariat for the Law of the Sea Convention, as well as a couple of other treaties, and the BBNJ. We are also the Secretariat performing the interim functions of what will become the Secretariat eventually. Personally, I've been working in ocean affairs and law of the sea for over 30 years, almost exclusively helping developing countries better manage their relationship with the oceans. It's been a long road, and I have a lot of positive things to say, and I have also a lot of alarms to ring, as the Senator has, I think, so eloquently done. I think one of the things that I would say that is really important to notice and to take advantage of is something almost everyone here has said so far, and that is the momentum. We have huge momentum on oceans. When I first started working in oceans, we were working with coastal engineers, people that build wharfs and fishing cooperatives. That was ocean governance. And the engineers worked for the state and the cooperatives worked for the towns or the communities. There was nothing else. The random scientist would show up every once in a while, say some things. Everybody would go, okay? Huh? So we've come a long way. We've come a long way in so many different platforms on different scales. The other one that I think is really interesting is that we've gone from a notion of coastal management, town planning almost, to a notion of global ocean governance. We have ocean affairs. We are here today. The term ocean governance is being used on top of the screen here. That is a huge progress. But we need to look at what's inside that and how does that work, and what needs to be built upon and what needs to be added or even fixed. The other one that I think is really fascinating, and I see this, one of my responsibilities is also the coordination of World Oceans Day, which is June 8th every year for the United Nations system. And when I started doing this a little bit over 10 years ago, we had 3 ambassadors talking to 4 ambassadors and a couple of secretaries in the basement of the UN. We've built momentum. We had 9 billion press impressions on World Oceans Day last year. 9 billion. And we generated that with 0 funding. It was all volunteer work. So the momentum is there. That's on the civil society, but it's there in the sciences, it's there on the legal, it's there in the diplomacy, it's there in the political, it's there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everywhere I go around the world, I see it. So that, I think, is hugely encouraging. Action, as you said, though, is the key. And perhaps I'll leave it at that, because I'd like to talk in the next round a little bit about how all of this momentum and this awakening is fantastic, but there's a silver lining to it that we can take advantage of. But we also need to be careful that we're not creating constructive interference. We're not tripping over ourselves. And I think that's really the key to success as we move forward. Thank you.
Oh, merci. Okay, that's it for optimism. Here's the boilerplate. The challenge is to manage the world's oceans and the resources together so that they are healthy and productive for the benefit of current and future generations. That's the goal. That's the overarching goal. We can all agree today that the ocean represents the future of humanity and that it needs to be restored. But today, only 15% of land and 7% of ocean are protected. These are some of the threats. Some of them have been mentioned already. Maintaining marine biodiversity, establishing and strengthening marine protected areas, confronting pollution, acidification, unsustainable fishing practice. And that list does not include perhaps the biggest concerns, which are climate change and sea level rise, which by 2050 will push more than 200 million people in 6 regions to move to higher ground. Each of these issues requires collaboration and coordination among nations and international organizations. It's a big challenge. You all know that. Right now, international waters are largely unregulated, largely governed by a fragmented patchwork of global agreements and organizations. So the question is, can international treaties work while over 250,000 international treaties are while 250,000 international treaties exist? Researchers with the Global Strategy Lab found that with notable exception of treaties governing trade and finance, international treaties have generally failed to produce their intended effects. It's not a criticism, that's just reality. Global governments must ratify the High Seas Treaty, the formal name for which the agreement is under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity. Oh no, take that back. This is the definition of that's the name, yeah. Global government must ratify the High Seas Treaty, the formal name for which is the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, or BBNJ agreement for short. So on that note, maybe we'll start at the other end since we've just come off of the UN. Francois, do you want to kind of chime in with how we're doing?
Sure.
Yeah. The question is, given the reality of, I mean, everyone started out with a very positive spin, which is the goal, but now the reality. And from Francois.
On y va.
Yeah. Yeah.
La réalité de François. First of all, I'm going to start by making your lives a lot easier. Just call it the BB&J Treaty. Don't call it the High Seas Treaty. High Seas Treaty is incorrect because High Seas is only part of what the treaty covers. We're forgetting everything that is under the water when you say High Seas Treaty, okay? And this is an important point because I can tell you it's not just semantics. Working in some countries, I've met with legal teams that are working on this, and they say, but when did we decide to omit the area from the High Seas Treaty? We weren't part of those meetings. So it does sound maybe like a silly thing, but it's really important that we get this right and that you make sure the media gets it right too, because it's being propagated as the High Seas Treaty, and it really shouldn't. So I've done that. You can tell my boss I said so. Now I can move on to the world according to Francois. In my personal view, I think we have to start with, I think your starting point is really good. There's a lot of treaties out there. What has worked and what hasn't? Can it work? I think the starting point in oceans is the Law of the Sea Convention because it defines who owns what where and who's responsible for what where. And I think that regime is very clear. The Law of the Sea Treaty does much more, but at least it gives us where the front and the backyard is and where our neighbors lie. Now, there are still many boundaries that are not negotiated, and that is something that isn't on the Law of the Sea Convention or on the UN. It's actually on the governments to do. Negotiating boundaries is a sovereign act between states. So I think where we can do a little bit more work, and we're almost there, is to finally get all the boundaries agreed upon. Some of those are going to be really tough, but they have to be there so that then we can start to say who is responsible for what and what rights do each countries and other actors have. We don't want to be fishing in someone else's area. We don't want to be blaming people for not acting when we can't even tell you where they're responsible for, et cetera, et cetera. This whole notion of responsibility under treaty or treaty obligations can't exist if we don't have those areas defined. So I think the Law of the Sea Treaty gives us already an enormous amount of, let's say, infrastructure upon which we can build all of the governance actions that we are talking about, the thematic ones particularly. Second point that I think I'd like to raise is more something for you to think about. I often ask, do you know who manages the oceans? Who governs the oceans? You know who governs your municipality, your town, your village? Pretty clearly, right? Women? Absolutely, yeah. True.
Yeah.
True. But in terms of the structures, in terms of the actual formal and informal structures, and how does that complex function? Who governs the oceans? Because we talk a lot about treaties on one side, we talk about governments on the other side, we talk about private sector on the other side, this basket of actors. But we don't really know how this all comes together, clearly. Or we might know very clearly for certain sectors. Usually the first people to answer are the people in shipping. For us, it's very clear. We know who governs our oceans. Fisheries is next, but that usually leads to arguments because there's a lot of disagreement, and particularly when you come into smaller communities or smaller fisheries. Okay, so the starting point, I think, is really to look at what it is that we are talking about, because only then we start to understand how we can do better or what needs to be added. And so one of the great things about the law of the sea and ocean affairs and ocean policy, whatever term you want to use, I really don't want to get hung up on terminology, except for High Seas Treaty, is we've come so far and we've seen now the emergence of what the Law of the Sea Convention always preached is integration. So we have integrative approaches. We have now, in many countries around the world, efforts, if not legislation and even administrations, that are built around integrating our approach to managing oceans. So it's no longer the shipping authority that works by itself, the fishing authority that works by itself, the science council that does ivory tower science, et cetera, no. And that's a huge, huge step forward, I think. It's being difficult at best and successful in some cases, but it's an ongoing process. There's no endpoint. As all of these things move forward, we are understanding our mistakes and we're being adaptive and we're trying to create systems that are responsive. So this is another point, is that adaptability, that responsiveness, that flexibility is really critical and has to be built into these systems. And then one final point is it has to be informed by knowledge, science, but also all kinds of other knowledges. And we really are doing a lot of work, including our office, in building the science policy interface or the knowledge policy interface, including with world assessment, the World Ocean Assessment we do every 5 years with a group of, I don't know, there's probably 2,000 scientists from around the world. So those are some of the elements of the governance system, I think, that I'd like to put on the table as we begin this discussion. Thanks.
And Francois, maybe we'll circle back to enforcement after we go through the panel here. Rita, you want to talk about 30 by 30 and other things?
Yes, and thank you, Francois, for putting this in such an eloquent manner. I do think that it's good to start off with that kind of more of the legal framework, the institutions, and how it kind of englobes all the work that we do. Within the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, and more specifically with the work that we have done in the past few years, it's been mainly focusing on how the HAC is a coalition of 120 countries. It's a structure that was built to kind of push for the adoption, as I mentioned before, of 30 by 30, of the protection of at least 30% of our planet's land and ocean by 2030. This was done through the Convention on Biological Diversity, so with the CBD, one of the 3 Rio conventions. But of course we know, and when we talk about conventions, when we talk about agreements, at the end of the day, it's all the countries and the governments that are taking those agreements and putting them into action. So from the coalition, the work that we do is mainly trying to focus on 2 main elements. One is mainly on the political element and making sure that actually we have we continue on having those conversations. We continue on putting these important elements at the highest level of the agenda, be it through ministerial meetings and the different international events. I mean, this year is an ocean year, thankfully. Last year was also a year that was full with different ocean meetings, but beyond only having those meetings, we need to actually be able to engage with the governments, engage and make sure that they actually, you know, are ambitious and are taking those action forward. So I think that is one of the main elements that we have been working on continuing on that political kind of component of it. The second element that we work a lot on is more on the technical element and how we support countries in the implementation of these important agreements or these important goals. And in the case of the HAC, we mainly focus on 30 by 30. And I think on that, it's quite important because many of the areas that are most important for biodiversity, when we talk about land, for example, there are in developing countries that need that support. Many of the countries that rely on their coastal areas are developing states, small island developing states and developing states. So we do need to provide that support. And from our perspective, we have done a lot of work on developing several tools to support the governments in that implementation. So for example, just to provide a couple, we have provided a matchmaking platform, which also gives me a lot of hope, if we're talking about hope and optimism, where countries are able to submit their requests and to share their gaps on the implementation of this goal. And from the Secretariat, we try to match those goals with the different opportunities and offers out there. This what enables is really that interconnection between the government's needs and what we can provide them as a solution for those needs. But also the exchange between the different governments, because in many cases, some governments have been able to progress on some elements, and I think also being able to share that experience is very, very important. And I think one third component that is very important is involving other stakeholders. And from the perspective of the coalition, we engage a lot with indigenous peoples and local communities and coastal communities as well. And I think this is a very important component that we need to put always on the agenda. From our perspective, we have created a task force specifically on indigenous peoples and local communities and also on subnational governments, where we really engage with those who are on the front ground and are really taking action. And I think that's an additional component. Why am I talking about the HAC in the context of this, more of this ocean governance as a whole? Because I think that we have, in this decisive decade, from now until 2030, we really have a very short time to deliver on many of our international agreements, including the 2030 Agenda, the UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, the CBD Convention, many other agreements that we have done. And so I think that coalitions like the one that we work on and under the leadership of Costa Rica and France, what we really try to do is accelerate action from where we're at, and accelerate and connect the different actors and the different partners as much as we can. So I think in a way it's being able to see from each and everyone's perspective, where do we fit in this acceleration for this decisive decade from now until 2030. And I hope that this is one of the takes that everyone in the audience can also take today, that each one of us is an enabler and is an accelerator. And I think in a way from the HAC Secretariat, this is exactly what we intend to do. We intend to accelerate that connection and spearhead from now until 2030.
But a lot of what you talk about, Rita, is integration, right? Which is important at this stage for you, and you're feeling hopeful about that part of it? Great. Victor.
Great. Thank you, John. So on the theme of realism, I think one of the challenges that we in the World Bank have observed is that of capacity, right? At the national level, I think, Rita, that's the direction in which you were going, which is how do we support our member countries, first of all, to understand this complex sort of international architecture of agreements, and then to meaningfully and effectively implement their obligations under those requirements. So one of the things that we have done at the World Bank's legal vice presidency, which is the legal department of the World Bank, is to take this on and try to do something about it. So 4 years ago, we came up with what is now known as the Oceans Governance Capacity Building Program. And the objective is simply to, make available training materials for government officials, for partners that are involved with us, and for other stakeholders. And what we do is we sit down and prepare a program for them a workshop. We've done 5 now across the different regions of the world, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's a multi-day program of training going through the different sort of international treaties, talking about the ocean governance processes, and improving overall the knowledge of the stakeholders about what ocean governance is about. In 5 years, John, I'm happy to report to you that we have trained more than 400 participants in 90 countries. Half of them were women. And, sort of going through the full range of what does it mean when you talk about UNCLOS at a country level? What are the specific obligations that a country signs up to when they say they have signed up to UNCLOS, right? What about port state measures? What are the obligations there? What does it mean to effectively and comprehensively sort of deal with marine protected areas? So those are some of the very practical things that we're doing at the World Bank to support our member countries to understand their obligations and then to live through those obligations. I still remember sort of traveling to West Africa, and you go to the Marine Research Institute, or you go to the Ministry of Fisheries, and they don't even have a boat to go out and do surveillance. So through the kinds of interventions the World Bank has, we make those resources available to them to be able to do enforcement, to be able to manage their resources more effectively. My colleague Jen, perhaps later on in the second panel, will get into some of the practical operational support that the World Bank provides. But I just wanted to highlight the capacity building program as one of those areas where we think we're making a difference, and we think we are helping the countries to understand their obligations and to be able to live up to them. The second related point that I wanted to make is that capacity building only goes so far, right? You also need to provide the tools that the countries need to be able to meet their obligations. So in that spirit, we have also put out a series of training materials. So we have a publication on sea level rise and its impacts on the territorial integrity of countries. We also have a series of oceans-related summaries of these international treaties, and we've worked very closely in partnership with Zaghloul. So thank you, Francois and your team. We've also partnered with a number of other organizations. So speaking about the importance of partnerships, in the training program, we work very closely with the Food and Agriculture Organization, with the International Seabed Authority, with 2 universities. One of them is the University of Melbourne in Australia. University of Nantes in France is also a partner. And, sort of demonstrating that by working together, we are leveraging the strengths of each of the partners to be able to deliver on the training program and make it more sustainable, right? We have a workshop that is coming up in Rome just after the 3rd Oceans Conference. That is sort of a culmination of the series of workshops that we have put together to train our stakeholders. So that is coming up in mid-June, and it is co-hosted with FAO, and it's going to take place in Rome. So just to illustrate some of the activities that we are undertaking to support countries in understanding their obligations and being able to implement them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. So no frustrations.
There is some frustration,
Yeah, okay.
like there has to be, but for the most part, I think, because we are spreading the joy by working together, I think that is sort of a reason for optimism, even as I remain realistic in terms of what we can achieve.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. Katrin, one thing you left out of your introduction was your role and your time in government. I'd be curious to hear a little bit about how
and the European Parliament.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to speak about that, but as you mentioned, I will answer about realism through the perspective I had through my different hats. You know, as a sailor, as a member of the French Minister of the Sea, as a politician, etc., etc. And I'm convinced.
For how many years were you in the EU?
5 years. The last mandate between 2019 and 2024, and I will speak about this European Ocean Pact. I'm still trying to push today. That is. I'm convinced by one thing is to accelerate, because we need to accelerate. We need a global framework, and it goes not very fast, but yeah, today we have all those treaties we are talking about. Those treaties, they are for the states. But we also need different level of governance. We need a level, regional level, at regional level in Europe, for example, I will speak about the European Ocean Pact we are working on. But we also need a better governance at the local level, because we are all concerned by the ocean. Ocean brings, even if we don't live near the sea, we are all concerned by what ocean brings to humanity. We are all in that room a part of the problem, but about a part of the solution. That's why we need to find, and if we want to accelerate, we need to mobilize everybody. And I think when of course, I won't speak about the global level. You understand the UNCLOS. We are working on that. But I think, and thanks to the World Bank, etc., thanks to your initiative, we need to support local communities, and in those local communities, you have a lot of women. An example to accelerate is to strengthen the women need to be concerned by governance. And in Costa Rica, I was immersed in change last June. Women from Costa Rica and South America launched an appeal for UNOC 3 to give the place to women in all governance systems. We also need to have an integrated approach, because where do the plastic come from? 80% from the pollutions come from the land. So we need in our countries an integrated approach in our policies. We need, for example, at the EU level, to connect the directive concerned by water and the directive that concerned sea waters. And this approach, we call this the GRITS water cycle approach, is at the core of the European Ocean Pact, because we need to connect a lot of policies. We won't tackle the climate the climate impact on the ocean if we don't tackle the Paris implement the Paris Agreement. You understand? So, and finally, I think because it concerns everybody, my feeling is that we need to mobilize our individual and collective responsibility. That's the feeling I had when I met the plastic in 1991. I felt a part of the problem and also a part of the solution. What does that mean? It's a new way to understand the UNCLOS, the UN Convention for Law of the Sea. Because this convention cut the ocean in pieces. the ICs, and the EEZ. But there is no border in the sea. And even if in the enclosed we have the part 12 that speaks about preservation, I think the states remember that they have the sovereignty in the EEZ, and they have the liberty for the navigation on the ICs. But they are still responsible. They have the duty to protect. But it's in the enclosed. That's why, with this idea to recognize the ocean as a global common, en français, c'est bien commun de l'humanité. It's very difficult for us to translate, because common good of humanity, for English speakers, they think about commons, they think about goods, but it doesn't. Le bien commun, l'océan est un bien commun de l'humanité. That means before having the sovereignty, before the liberty, we are responsible as a citizen, as a member state, a state, as a private sector, a collectivity. We all are. That's, I think, what I'm sure that we need to push this idea to accelerate, because even though we are still trying the implementation of those treaties that are not going enough fast. You understand what I mean? So if we need to accelerate, we need that. And finally, I think I was in New York for the ocean. I've been in all those meetings, and in Nice, with all the stakeholders that gather around this European Ocean Pact, we will organize. 1 year ago, we have launched a manifesto that is here for a European Ocean Pact. And during my mandate, I was trying to push a blue pact in the Green Deal, etc., trying to put ocean as a political priority, because ocean is not a political priority in our countries. And it's an optimistic constant that the European Commission decided to have Ursula von der Leyen, when she has been elected in last July, she said, we will have a European Ocean Deal, but she will explain what will be the deal, the pact, in June. So we are still trying to push to have the biggest ambition that we put in the manifesto. And I hope it will be a new day. This conference will take place the 9th of June, and I hope the 10th, Europe will wake up with an ocean pact.
In something you said some months or years ago, you said sometimes when you're sailing, you have to lower your mainsail a little bit, right? To take advantage of, to deal with reality.
Yeah.
How does that relate to your work in politics and ocean issues?
Yeah, you have seen the end of my video I sent. Because I have the feeling that on land we are, as navigator, who will see the low pressure arrival, the hurricane, and don't move, you understand? Don't reduce the sail. But a sailor needs to reduce its sails and to anticipate the question if the main word, and I'm sure it's the same for you as an explorator, the first word is anticipation. You need to anticipate all what should arrive, but could arrive, but even if it doesn't arrive.
Yeah, you like that, Francois? That notion of anticipation, because sometimes we think we're very short-sighted, and
Yeah, I do. Actually, it's interesting you raised it in that way. I was going to raise it as a navigator, as an explorer. It's the destination that counts. The journey is more important, and the road to the end is never the one you think it is. And, right? So going around these storms, but sometimes going through them is also important, and knowing when to reduce the sails. But you need the capacity to do that, and I'm going to jump to capacity since I have the mic, because I think this is really one of the underlying imperatives. I call it the capacity imperative. We need to really be honest with ourselves and look out there and see what capacities there are. The examples that have been given from this panel are the tip of the iceberg. We work with countries, communities even, where the capacity to understand and act is so low that we can't expect them to be able to be real stakeholders in this process. We talk about it a lot in terms of states, and that's who, as an international civil servant, my primary responsibility is with. But the ocean governance frameworks work from the General Assembly of the United Nations all the way down to communities. And the lack of capacity in developing and developed countries on oceans is staggering. What I find fascinating is I didn't mention this, I'm head of capacity development in trust funds. And when I talk to donors, they're not interested in building capacity. They want to do the ocean thing. They want to do the whale thing. I think of Brigitte Bardot, you know, they want to be like that. They want to be the icon on a specific issue. When I ask them, well, you know, what about the human capacity? Oh, that's someone else. Call them out on this, please, because we are really setting ourselves up to go straight into the storm with a spinnaker out. We are. That's one. The other one that I wanted to mention is finance, which comes with capacity. And here I think it's really important to note that ODA, or official development assistance, is really a very small portion of the funding going to ocean issues. I think our colleagues at OECD calculated to be about 1.5% or 1.6% of total ODA, with numbers like hundreds of millions, like 300 million or 400 million, something like that, which doesn't buy you anything today, especially when we're talking about understanding ocean processes from a scientific perspective, or the surveillance, monitoring, and control complex that we need to effectively control the ocean and activities out there. Now, there is a flood of money coming in from private philanthropies, and I think that this is really, really important to take advantage of, and I mean that in the positive sense. Private capital, philanthropic capital, impact investors have come to the table now more than ever. This started in 2017, and I think it's now really a fantastic movement. However, like everything, when there are too many cooks in the kitchen trying to cook their own recipes, yes, we're all in the kitchen cooking dinner, but it's not really going to give us an interesting, good meal, nor is it going to be effective in the ocean when we have so many different initiatives happening. Each initiative has so much value. I don't think I've ever seen one where I really think, my gosh, why? But the intersection and the additionalities are not there yet. And so it's really important that we have increasingly discussions with this kind of capital. And again, everything from philanthropy to blended investments, there's a whole basket here that we can work with. And here I think really important is the leadership of Monaco on this Blue Economy and Finance Forum that we'll be having on the 7th and 8th, or 6th, 7th and 8th of June in Monaco. But we need more around that. The final one, which I know speaks to you, John, and that is we're also really sailing into a storm with regard to enforcement capacity. And a lot of people say that and agree, but we forget that there is a lot that happens once a crime has been detected. So this whole world of detecting and being able to actually control an activity, but then gathering evidence, arresting, proper treatment of accused people, prosecution, detention, incarceration, et cetera, et cetera. Sadly, our colleagues who work in this field, the UNODC office, say more criminals are just left floating face down in the water than brought back to shore. And that's a trend that's only going to increase because our uses of ocean space and resources is increasing, but our capacity to manage that from a surveillance, monitoring, control, and prosecution is not going anywhere fast. So that's another area, I think, where we should really capitalize.
Thank you for leaving us with that image. Bad guys floating in the ocean.
John, do you mind if I jump in on that point about enforcement? Because that's an area where actually the World Bank has invested quite heavily, both in terms of helping countries to build their capacity to do monitoring, control, and surveillance. But also more downstream, what happens once you apprehend, the person that is committing a crime? And it is a pretty complicated space because you do need prosecutorial capacity. You need those facilities to hold, these individuals, many of whom would be foreign nationals. It does lead to diplomatic complexity because of that, right? So we've tried really hard across the world, but particularly in the Pacific, to work with the regional fisheries bodies to have a pooled approach, of let's build capacity at the RFMO level. And then support the countries to understand what their legal obligations are, and then support them in implementation. We often run into very difficult questions from Office of the Attorneys General that are asking questions about, but UNCLOS says we may arrest, and we've done exactly that. So why do you want us to let this person go because they are a foreign national? What does that do to in terms of signaling to the other people who may be doing the same activity? So very complicated space, but I think what our experience from the World Bank has been is that it's a gradual process, but I think sustained effort can lead to results. Thanks.
Rita, before we jump off the stage, could you talk a little bit about who's next in regard to 30 by 30?
Who's next?
Who's next? What groups? What nations? Who's following most closely in your footsteps, or as you would say, your flip-flops?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is with regards to 30 by 30, and I just came back last week. There was a meeting, an SOS Ocean meeting happening in Paris. That actually, I think what it enabled was really to create a bit of momentum towards the UN Ocean Conference. And one element that I would say on following the ambition of the high ambition coalition countries is really to get to the 60 signatories to have the BBNJ come into force. So that's one thing that we really, it's something that we need to push for, all of us. At the moment, I think we're at 21, if I'm not mistaken. That was the number last week. And so I think making sure that we take into account those international events and those international gatherings to create more momentum is something that we really need to push into. And I would say many countries now within the High Ambition Coalition are really trying to accelerate their action. And I see a lot of, I'll give the example of Madagascar because it's a brilliant example that is very close to my heart. They actually last year requested from the Hague Secretariat to support them. They are, as you might know, the 4th largest island in the world. They are a mega diverse country, a hotspot for biodiversity, and that's really why I've always been very, very enamored with that country. And last year, what they wanted to do was to create a roadmap of 30 by 30, a national roadmap. Very much kind of looking into also how they can engage their coastal communities, the women. It was like a comprehensive approach that they wanted to give, and they finalized. Thanks to different partners that we were able to connect them with, the philanthropic sector that you were mentioning, and Jonathan is here. He will talk a bit more about that in the future, in the next panel. But I think, in a way, it's they managed to bring together many different stakeholders and put together this roadmap. And this year, they're now intending to put this roadmap into action. So I think in this case, I would say the ones leading the way in many cases are very ambitious small countries, mega diverse countries that are really moving forward and pushing the lever. But also, as I mentioned last week, President Macron, the president of France, was really kind of increasing the ambition and showing leadership, saying that at the moment, and as you mentioned at the beginning, we have only 8.5% of ocean that is protected, and we need to get to 30% by 2030, at least. I will say at least. So we have to quadruple our efforts within only 5 years. And President Macron, he was really pushing last week in his speech and kind of showing ambition, saying, let's by UNOC get from 8.4 to 12%. And so, having countries of the Hague being, and countries in general, being very ambitious and being very vocal at the political level, at the technical level, and very important element on finance as well, to kind of make sure that this all kind of comes together. But I would say, as concrete countries, I'm mentioning Madagascar because that's one concrete example that I think now is kind of, we're really looking forward to accelerate. At the moment, they only have 0.9% of their ocean that is protected, and now we're kind of accelerating action with them. So that brings me hope, if that was the question on who is next within those ambitious countries of the Hague.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. On that optimistic note, I think we might change ourselves out for a next panel. Like, Catherine, yeah.
Something.
Yes.
Yeah. Very short, I promise. Would like to speak about two things: science and capacities. Science, because you spoke about, we did not really speak about science, but in Nice we will have the launch of the IPOS, the International Panel for Ocean Sustainability, and it's very interesting because it will bring science to policy. The idea, and when President Macron, and thanks to him, France took a leadership somewhere in those topics. But he needs to follow science. We need science to bring to know where to go.
To inform governance.
Yeah, to enforce. Of course, yeah, that's good. The other thing is the philanthropy. It will be in the next panel, but I'm very impressed by the work of philanthropists, because 20 years ago, 10 years ago, they were not there. Except Pew, but Ocean 5, Bloomberg, etc. They are here, and we really need. In France, we have several. You will speak about wind propulsion, etc. I know a lot of projects that needs private sector, public, the World Bank, etc. But also philanthropists to begin, etc. And the last word will be on the blue carbon, because the blue carbon is one of my main topics. We need, for some topics, to create a mechanism, and financial mechanism. The blue carbon is the forest in the ocean, and we don't really know how much they can capture how much they can capture the carbon, and we need to create the mechanism. We have several solutions that are on the table today, and I think it's something the World Bank, probably the philanthropists, and everybody, we need to accelerate on this topic, I think. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Especially at this moment in time when some governments are withdrawing vast amounts of monies from exactly the kinds of projects you all are working on. Thibaut, now you're happy? Great. Okay.
Good morning. Honored to join this vital conversations. And it is really, for me, a privilege to stand in front of you this morning and to contribute to this important conversations as we build momentum towards the Blue Economy and Finance Forum set to take place in the Principality of Monaco, June 7 and 8, ahead of the United Nations Ocean Conference. For Monaco, the ocean is more than a natural resource. It is part of our identity. It is very much intertwined into our culture, our history, and our way of life. Under the leadership of our princes, and for over a century, Monaco has been in the forefront of environmental stewardship, with a special focus on ocean conservation. Prince Albert I, a pioneering scientist and explorer, led the foundation for oceanography. In fact, in 1918, he was bestowed with the prestigious Alexander Agassiz Medal by the National Academy of Science for his contribution to oceanography and for his foresights on environmental matters. In fact, in his acceptance speech, he spoke about the importance of marine conservation and the establishment of marine protected areas. Today, his great-great-grandson, Prince Albert II, continues proudly his legacy as a leader, but also through the work of his eponymous foundation, the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, where ocean conservation is at the heart of its mission. And yet, our oceans have never faced such greatest threats. Over 60% of our marine ecosystem is degrading or being exploited unsustainably. Plastic pollution has filtered at the deepest corners of our seas. And we can see even that harmful chemicals are deteriorating our biodiversity and also our human life. Putting the life-sustaining power of our ocean at risk. And you know, as we witness the current decline of the stock market these past few days, I think we are reminded of the volatility and uncertainty of the shape of our global economy. And if market shift can happen suddenly, the challenges that our oceans are facing are as urgent. And let me tell you, their consequences, unlike tariff, will be felt through generations. So this moment demands bold collective action. Government, civil society, and the private sector must engage and collaborate on a scale. Corporations need to reimagine their value chains. Entrepreneurs and innovators must be empowered to bring groundbreaking solutions to the market. And financial capital must be directed toward creating lasting impact. And this is exactly where the Prince Albert of Monaco Foundation is taking decisive action. Through initiatives such as the Reocean Funds, the foundation is investing in transformative companies, advancing the regenerative blue economy. And with the Blue Economy Index, the foundation is introducing a new benchmark to guide investment in sustainable ocean industries. But yet we all know that real changes require a united global efforts. And this is exactly what the Blue Economy and Finance Forum is designed to strengthen. The Blue Economy offers a path forward where sustainable investment drive both environmental resilience and financial returns. So now it is my great pleasure to share with you a message recorded by His Royal Highness Prince Albert on the critical goals of the Blue Economy Forum and the decisive actions ahead. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we now understand how central the ocean is to our future. Whether we speak about climate, biodiversity, or health, or whether we address food, trade, or energy, every time we look to the future, our focus inevitably shifts to the ocean. Despite this, we are still struggling to create a world capable of respecting these vast expanses of water and their ecosystems, preserving their delicate balance, and safeguarding their wealth. However, we must act now, without delay, to prepare this world. Through global governance regulations, which will be the focus of the Nice UNOC conference from the 9th to the 13th of June, and through the development of an economic model commensurate with these evolving requirements. True to its traditions, its values, and its ambitions, the Principality of Monaco has decided to take action for this by organizing, with the support of Costa Rica and France, the organizers of the UNOC conference, a dedicated event to advance this goal, the Blue Economy and Finance Forum, which will be held on the 7th and 8th of June 2025 at the Grimaldi Forum, just ahead of the Nice conference. But this event will be more than a forum. It will provide a unique opportunity to bring together decision makers, finance professionals, philanthropists, NGOs, and players from the private sector to turn ambition into action. Together, we will drive the investments needed for a sustainable blue economy, both public and private, and lay the foundations for a future that unites human progress with planetary conservation. In order to achieve this, we will address key sectors: maritime transport, fishing and aquaculture, renewable marine energies, sustainable tourism, and conservation of the marine environment. We will make the ocean's immense value tangible, with its ecosystem services representing close to $30 trillion annually. We will explore how to mobilize $175 billion every year to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, and in order to do so, increase current investments sevenfold. Faced with such a challenge, businesses have a pivotal role to play. Governments must provide the impetus, and every stakeholder can be a vital force for change. That is why we must move forward all together. That is why I invite you to join us in Monaco on the 7th and 8th of June 2025 to share your vision, discover innovative solutions, and be a part of the movement shaping the future of the blue economy, the ocean, and our planet. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and your commitment, and looking forward to a very productive panel discussions. Thank you.